I've held 2 coding jobs so far, and they were both very, very different. So the first one I had, I was still in school, and I got a job at a biology lab doing some data science stuff and helping with a project that, well, I won't go into too many details, but he basically analyzed gene sequence stuff. So I worked on that. There wasn't much C or C++ involved. It was mostly Perl, and that was by choice of the original developer. So that was a pretty interesting job, but it was a student job, so it didn't pay much, and it was very, very challenging. But also, one of the interesting things about that job was I had to make it happen. There was no one that approached me and said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And even when I got the job, the guy was a little hesitant about letting me jump right into code and right into the meat and potatoes of it, of the project. And I'm sure he had his reasons, but I think what he wanted to see was a level of interest. Because at first it was like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to this biology lab, show you what we do, have you work with a few of the other guys. And I was doing that, and it was not my cup of tea. Like I didn't really care. I was just like, all right, so you're doing some research, taking some pictures, mixing some things, going over the proper storage methods, and gathering data. And I was just thinking the whole time, like, I'm not interested in this. If this is all I'm going to be doing, I should just walk out now, because this isn't me. Although it was pretty interesting. It was nice to meet the new people. So I remained polite. I remained cordial. I showed up and did what I could and that sort of thing. But at some point, after a while, I just went to my boss and I was like, "Look, when can I get involved in this code stuff? That's what I'm really here for." And I just straight up said it like that. And he was just like, "Oh, okay." So I think it clicked to him at that point that I wasn't really interested in anything other than getting involved in the software stuff. And things changed just from that quick couple sentences I said after, I didn't immediately go into the lab and be like, all right, give me the code. I kind of let him feel it out. And I think that made him more comfortable with me. Maybe I could have, I don't know. I think I played it okay overall. But it was a little tricky. It wasn't just the easiest thing to dive into. I mean, this was like his last 10 years work and a piece of software, and to just let some guy he doesn't know very well dive in and have at it, I don't think he was super comfortable with that until he got to know me a little better and know that I was, going to be dedicated, basically. And almost immediately he was like, okay, I got it. That's what you want to do? That's what you're interested in? And he started setting me up with this stuff. He's like, okay, here's how you access this, here's how you get to that. And I was like, cool, I'll take it from here. I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions for you. I'll take a lot of notes. All that. And, it was, I didn't really know how it would go. Every job's different. Every person who runs any job is different. But it was a very open job, and I was working on it quite a bit for the first month. But it got to the point where I started feeling really drained. I was basically working on the same thing. I was getting stuck a lot. And without going into too many details, I'll say it was extremely hard. And not just because I'd never used Perl before. Perl wasn't too bad to learn. I picked up Perl decently quickly. I'm not an expert in it, but I can read it and modify code. And, that's the thing. Once you learn how to code in one environment, you can sort of figure out other environments way quicker than you could before. It's just getting really good at the first one that takes time. So it's worth it to stick with one until you get really good at it, rather than bounce around a lot. Because if you bounce around a lot, it's going to be a slower learning curve overall. So Perl wasn't that bad just because I dove so much into C++. So I had that requisite algorithm knowledge and all that. to bring in. But it got to the point where the guy who originally wrote this, he was writing it on his own accord. He wasn't a trained software developer or anything. He was doing it to just process data. So it was a big data processing structure. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It's very cool. It's one of those things that can make a difference in the world, just based on what I did. So I was pretty motivated just by that. I was like, okay, this is really cool. I feel like I'm doing something useful. That's great. So a month goes by, I'm working on it, I'm documenting, I'm figuring out how everything goes, I'm making improvements in the structure. My overall goal was to make it usable by anyone, because the way it was basically only usable by the person who wrote it, because there wasn't really any instructions. You just kind of had to figure it out. So that's what I did. I basically figured it out, asked a lot of questions, documented everything, made up nice little documents. I changed the structure of it, the flow. I changed the way it handled a lot of the includes and just like libraries and stuff. Tried to make a lot of improvements there. I wrote very careful instructions about how a user or a new user should acquire the data required to start running a new batch of a new data set on it. And that wasn't easy to figure out because basically it wasn't documented. And I guess there was a student that worked on it before me, and he seemed like he was okay. But after observing his work and comparing it to where it was, the project was before he came in, I basically came to the conclusion that he kind of gave up. He went to the point where he was just like, he was grabbing tools from the internet to run analysis on the code, and that's where he was. So he wasn't really like modifying the code or trying to figure it out anymore. He was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna run some stuff to make it look like I'm doing something useful. So he was running like, I don't know, just lint tools and stuff on it, which, it has its use, but I think it wasn't really doing much for the actual program to advance it anymore. And maybe that's why he left. I mean, he didn't get fired or anything. He actually left. And I think he left because he graduated and was moving on to a new job, a real job, not a student job. So there wasn't any red flags or anything there, but I did get the feeling that it was hard. Like this was clearly a hard job. And I was definitely challenged. So I really liked all that about it. That was cool. So anyway, I keep getting sidetracked here, but a month goes by. I'm not feeling very motivated to work on it much more. I've done the big pieces. I've documented it. I've restructured it. It feels pretty usable to a new guy coming in, I think. But I need some other people to test it. I need a fresh set of eyes on it, basically. I need someone else to try from scratch. And that's kind of where I was. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot I could do. I was just kind of poking around at it, being like, I don't know what to do next. So some of the next goals were basically to write a manuscript on the whole thing. And I was like, whoa. I didn't feel qualified to do it because the underlying algorithm of what it did exactly, I didn't fully understand. I'm not a biologist, and there were a lot of biological terms in there, that things about DNA and sequencing that I didn't exactly know what they meant. So I'd have to constantly look them up. And then there were so many acronyms that I constantly have to look them up. I just didn't feel like I had the requisite knowledge to write a manuscript on the whole thing. I was like, sure, I can document how it runs and the general results it gives and generalities, but I can't tell you specifics of what it's doing with the DNA. I can just give generalities. So I didn't know how to really explain that to my boss other than the way I just explained it to you. And he didn't really like that explanation, which is understandable. I think he understood, but his mindset was like, okay, well, go learn it. And I was like, okay, I'm trying. It's a lot of stuff. I mean, I've taken 2 biology classes, and I've got this book here that I'm going through daily. I'm looking up stuff daily, but there's just so much. This is like a career, lifelong profession to learn all this stuff. And that's just not my interest. I don't want to be a biologist. So I made the decision that I have to leave. And I have to do something else. Because I didn't want to keep going that same direction. And it was tough. But ultimately, I just wrote up an email and I said, look, my interests are more aligned with software development. And I see that I'm going to have to dive really deep into biology here if I want to continue. And I think I'm just going to go the software development route. I was very open about that stuff and let them know, look, my long-term goal is to be a game developer. I told them that I was basically really happy to be part of what I was part of, but I do have to leave this job in the lab and move on to the next thing. And he was just like, his immediate response was, no, please don't leave. I need you. And I was just like, okay. So that made it hard to leave because he was like, no, don't leave. And I kind of poked around for another couple months. I didn't get very many hours, although I was given complete freedom, basically. It was like, look, there's keys to the lab. You can go in whenever you need. You can work from home if you want. Just clock your hours. It's fine. And it was very open like that. And that made it also hard to leave because that was cool. But the underlying problem was I didn't have the motivation to keep pursuing deeper into biology. I thought maybe at a later date, but I'm still in my head. I want to go towards game development. So that decision didn't change. That wasn't going to change no matter how good everything else sounded. And yeah, I stuck around for another semester, but when I graduated, I also left the lab, and I clocked like 10 hours a week at that point, and while I was in my last 3 months. This was after I already said I was going to leave, but I basically stuck around, attended the meetings, did some little stuff. I also helped, a new guy got hired, and I helped the new guy get acquainted to the program and everything, so I did a little bit of training for the new guy that would, I think, was essentially going to replace me, although I don't think he could replace me, not to sound like I'm bragging or anything, just because he wasn't as insane as I was, basically. Like, when I get into a project, I become insane about it. I'll obsess and focus and just go all out until it works like I want it. And not very many people have that. And I think that's a quality of insanity. So this guy was more normal than me. So I don't think he was going to be able to jump in the project like I did, just based on that. Wow, I don't know how that's going to sound later when I listen back to it, but yeah, that's basically my personality. Is I've become very obsessed over my projects, and that has its benefits and its downsides. I don't know if I want to get into all that. Basically, the downside of that is eventually you have a million projects and you don't have time for them all, and that's where I'm at now. So I'm trying to pick and choose a little better. And I do things while I can. And it's one of the reasons I do videos in the car like this, is because this is when I have just complete downtime where I can't work on any of my projects. I'm basically just stuck in a car for hours driving, and there's nothing else for me to do. So it's like I gotta do something. I'll record a video, talk about things. Alright, that works for me. But if I'm at home, I don't do videos as often because I'm often just involved in something already, and I don't feel like stopping and getting into the video mindset. Then also I feel like I'm at home. I have plenty of time to prepare and do this video better than I would in the car. But in the car, it's just like I can wing it, and you guys can see the sky and get a little background. Anyway, all right. So I leave that job. I graduate, and I applied to some companies that I wanted to be a part of, all gaming companies. I applied to Wizards of the Coast, or Hasbro. I applied to a few other gaming companies, and I updated my resume and everything on Monster, Career Builder, which is scary. I don't know if I'd recommend doing that, honestly. I mean, if you just need a job and don't feel like looking, it's a good thing to do. But basically what happens when you update your resume on Career Builder or Monster or any of those sites is recruiters see that you recently updated your resume, and they start calling you and giving you job opportunities, or trying to set you up with something, so that that's their job, is to help line you up. Now, people have a lot of mixed feelings about recruiters. Some people hate them, some people love them. Overall, my experience with the recruiters is good. And the reason I'm talking about this at all is because I've gotten a lot of my professional experience because I've worked with recruiters. Sure, I could go apply to jobs individually, but man, I'm always involved in something else. So I rarely apply to a job unless it's something I really want. I'm not just going to go apply to a bunch of banks and stuff, or dig around looking for jobs all day. I'm just if I see a company I really like, I'll go apply to them. And that's basically it. But otherwise, I'll update my resume and stuff on there. And recruiters will call and offer me stuff. And a lot of times, I'll just say I'm not too interested, or it's too far away, or I can't relocate at this time. But occasionally, something comes up where it's okay, that sounds great. And, we'll go over the whole 9 yards. And if the job sounds good, I'll take it. So that's how I got my current job, doing C++. After a month or two of being graduated and kind of hanging around, waiting for a good opportunity. Not necessarily wait. I mean, I did apply to stuff, but I needed a job. And I don't remember what I did for a couple months. It took a couple months, though. I think I mainly worked on my game engine thing. Like a Walmart truck. Well, anyway, so I get this job through a recruiter with a company doing just, the job specifically said C++ software development. I was like, perfect. That's all I want to do. You try to throw me on another language, I'm not really that interested. I want to get better at C++ because I want to be a game developer. And I'm very open about that. Even in job interviews, when they say, okay, so this job had nothing to do with game development really, other than it worked with a lot of math, which was perfect. I can practice my C++, use math to, practice that. That's going to be very useful in game development. Everything about this job would basically advance my skills as a game developer. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. I want this job. I do want this job. Let's negotiate. I'll do whatever I can to make sure I get it. Dress to impress, whatever. I don't care. I want this job. I'm not getting any game developer ones because, well, let's face it, I don't have any games under my belt. And that's what almost every big company wants. They say you need at least 2 or 3 releases before we would consider you. Fair enough. I understand. So I'm not getting any of those big jobs. But I could get this one just based on my C++ skill alone. So, well, let's take it for the top. I scheduled the first interview, and a flood happened. There was a flood at my current residence, and I couldn't make the interview. And I was like, oh God, this is going to ruin my chances. I was very nervous about it. I was like, I called everyone I could, the recruiter, the person I was supposed to have the interview with. I was like, look, I'm really sorry, I can't make the interview. There's a big flood going on at my house that I have to deal with, and I'm kind of in a pickle here. And they're like, okay, no problem, we'll reschedule. And I was like, whew. And I was thinking, I really hope this doesn't hurt my chances. And ultimately it didn't, because I did the interview later, and it went pretty well. I was a little nervous about it. Not that nervous, though. I don't get that nervous in interviews. Not anymore. Even if I'm doing bad in an interview, I don't get that nervous. I don't know why. Maybe I've just done enough of them. But I think that kind of shows through a little bit, shines through, whatever. People don't like being around really nervous people. It makes them uncomfortable and nervous, too. So, I think that helped. But the coding question they gave me was really easy to me. I was like, yes! Maybe something I could handle no problem. And they could have gave me something really hard. And maybe, thinking back on it, this question would probably be really hard to a lot of people. But it's just something I had done so much already that I was like, oh yeah, that's no problem. Just thought about it for a minute, did the thing. They asked me a lot of other questions too, like what I have experience with, have I ever used this, have I ever used that. I answered them all as honestly as I could. I didn't try to talk up my skills any more than what my stuff showed. I have a giant GitHub account with like 70 things on it, so I think that helped. I think they were just overwhelmed when they looked at my GitHub account because there's so much stuff. And there's a couple programs on there that have a decent amount of stars from the community, so I think that helped. And one of them's based on D&D. I have this little D&D app thing that I've been working on, and I think they really liked that, because I guess a couple of people at the company played D&D and were like, oh, cool, you fit right in. So that helped. So ultimately I got the job. I was nervous that I wouldn't, but I got the call back and they're like, okay, yeah, we'd like to hire you. Great. So I'm hired through a recruiter. I'm a contractor. I don't mind being a contractor. The pay's still well enough. I'm having a hard time getting to 40 hours every week because, well, driving's a big thing. And it's really hard to code for 8 hours a day. Just to say right out. Most people can only do 4 to 6 hours of coding, and I find I'm about the same. Once I hit like hour 7 or hour 8, I do not feel effective anymore. I can kind of poke around and get through things, but it's very slow. I make a lot of mistakes, and yeah, you should just stop after 6 hours, especially if you're not feeling it. Go do something else, go rest, go plan, whatever, It's a pretty big deal, really. It took me a while to figure that out, because I was trying to do 10-hour 410s for a while, and that didn't work so well. I was feeling really bad at the end of every day when I was doing 10 hours. And my boss had some concerns. She was like, look, things aren't going quite as well as I expected with you, and like how fast you're producing code and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I feel that too. And yeah, we kind of just leveled on that. And I was like, all right, look, I've realized some things. I need to adjust my schedule. I cannot do these 10 hours. I'm just completely useless after a few hours, and I'm basically feel like I'm wasting company time, and it feels really bad to me too. So I don't want to do that. I need to figure out a better way to be productive while I'm here. And we just had some discussions like that, and I really had to come down on myself and be like, look, get your head straight. That was really important. And things are going better now, but that really took me like a month or two to sort out. I was really having such a rough time because the hours I was trying to do was not working for me, but I was also trying to get enough hours because I thought, oh, if I don't get enough hours, they're going to be upset that I'm not getting enough hours. But they're a really cool company, and they're more about results than anything else. So it's like, look, we don't care how many hours you get. It's just a matter of getting the project done. I mean, if you can get it done quicker, that's great, because it costs us less, we have to pay you less. But at the same time, it's also important to get it done right, and everybody works at a different pace. You'll get faster as you get more used to our libraries. We get all that, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And so a couple more months have gone by, and things have definitely improved. I feel way better. I feel way more comfortable. I've basically conceded that I'm going to work the hours I feel comfortable working, and that's it. And they're cool with that too. So yeah, I have learned a lot doing this job. A lot about myself, about what it takes to be a professional coder, about using your time effectively, and I wouldn't change it. However, there will come a time where I have to leave because, well, my interests are still with game development, and I have been very open about that to my boss too. He said, look, I don't plan on staying here forever. I want to stay as long as I can and get as much experience as I can. One day, I'm going to move on to game development. AAA game development. That's my long-term goal. And that gives me the daily motivation. Alright, well, thanks for watching this video. That's what my career has been like so far. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good one.